Welcome to Home Farm. Today we're making homemade pizza. Making homemade pizza is really easy, and these are the simple ingredients that we use. We have 500 grams of strong flour, we have active yeast, we have salt, bit of olive oil, and 300 milliliters of water. The process is really easy. We take our 500 grams of strong flour, we put it into a mixing bowl. We're going to add our yeast. I put in 3 teaspoons of yeast, approximately 3 of those, 3 flat teaspoons. Just gets added in. 2 generous pinches of salt, crunching it down a little bit. Very, very important is that you get your measurements as close as possible when it comes to making pizza. So I have exactly 500 grams and exactly 300 milliliters of water. The reason that's important is that if you add too much water, the dough becomes very, very runny. If you add too little, it gets dry. We find that 300 milliliters of water is just perfect for the consistency of our homemade pizza. The last bit is to add a good glug of olive oil. If you need a more accurate measure, take about 2 tablespoons and add that in. Now you can do one of 2 things. You can either mix that all up with a spoon, transfer it to a wooden board and knead it by hand, or if you have a mixer with a dough attachment, you put it onto the mixing platform and mix it for 10 minutes. That's what we're going to do now. We're going to use our mixer. Now we've transferred our mixing bowl to the mixing platform. I'm going to attach the dough hook onto the actual mixer. I'm going to close it and activate it, or switch it on onto a speed of about 2 or 3, and we're going to let that run for 10 minutes, exactly 10 minutes, and you'll see the dough will start to mix through really nicely and develop a lovely dough-like consistency. The reason that we use strong flour and a mixer is because strong flour has extra gluten protein in it. What that means is that it creates that lovely web-like lattice in the dough when you bake it. So when you get a nice piece of bread or a good pizza dough and you pull it through, you get that texture and structure inside. That's what this does. So as the mixer hook is going around and round, pulling the dough, it's just expanding the elasticity of the dough itself, and it's going to create the dough-like texture that we need to make a really soft, lovely, bread-like dough. So we hit the 10-minute mark, the dough's done, it's looking fantastic. What we're going to do now is I'm going to take it out, look at that for elasticity. I'm going to bring it across and show you what the dough looks like and walk you through the next step. So there's the dough there. We can see how elastic it is. It's looking absolutely fantastic. I'm going to leave it like it is now. We're going to cover it with a clean cloth and put it into a dry, warmish place where there isn't a lot of air movement. Air movement means that when it goes through the actual dough, the dough will collapse and it just won't prove as well. Proving is the process whereby the dough, the yeast activates in the dough, and that dough that we can see now is going to treble in size over the course of the next few hours that we allow it to prove. I'm going to take my clean cloth now, like I said. We're going to just cover very loosely the mixing bowl itself. I keep ours in our side oven because it's a really good environment for that. It's just going to go in there, and we're going to leave it there for the next 7 or 8 hours. Just to be clear, the oven is not on. We just leave it at room temperature, and that is enough to allow the yeast to activate. The other point that I'd like to make is that you can see now it's 9:30 in the morning. We typically roll out our pizzas at around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. That means this dough is going to proof for about 8 hours. And the reason that we allow it to proof for that long is because we want the yeast to just work its way through the dough, and it just develops that lovely bread-like smell and taste, which is why we leave it for so long. Next up, we're going to make our own tomato base for our pizza. You can buy a store-bought one, but these sauces are typically full of sugar, full of fats, full of everything. We're going to make our own tomato base, which is cheap and it's healthy, and everything in there is just delicious. We use a passata pre-made sauce from Tesco, which basically acts as our base. We add a little bit of balsamic vinegar to that, a little bit of salt, and Italian herbs right at the end. Now I'm going to show you how to make this quick and easy sauce. So now we've incorporated all of our ingredients together. They're all in, so we've got the passata, the raw passata paste sauce. We've got the balsamic vinegar and the salt. We're just going to give that a mix through, and as I do that, you can see how thin that sauce is. Very watery. What we're going to do is we're going to put it onto a low temperature on the stove and allow it to reduce. Reduction basically means that we're just boiling out the water. We're just going to evaporate it out, and we're going to get a lovely thick tomato base for our pizza. So we've got that on a really low temperature. The herbs we're going to add right at the end, because if we add them in now, they just tend to cook through and they lose their flavor a little bit. A word of warning at this stage is that as this starts to heat up, it almost starts to boil as it starts to thicken, and it can create pockets of almost lava-like consistency, which you're just going to be a little bit wary of. If it starts to bubble a little bit too aggressively and it starts to split out like a volcano all over the tiles in your kitchen, give it a bit of a stir, release the air pockets, and just turn the temperature down a touch more as it continues to thicken out. This process will probably take about 15 minutes to thicken on a low to medium temperature. So this sauce has only been on for about 3 minutes, and we can already see that it's starting to bubble. What is important about this particular sauce is that you don't have to stir it all the time. Only stir when you start getting bubbles and it's starting to basically sputter and splatter. The air pockets are beginning to form, so we're just going to give it a gentle stir just to release some of the air that's formed down at the bottom and release all of it. It is important that you keep your sauce under control. So if yours is spluttering and getting tomato sauce all over the tiles around your stovetop, now's the time to turn it down. Also, if you've got it boiling too warm, it's going to start to burn from the bottom, which is also not an outcome that you want. So we've had the sauce on for about 15 minutes. It's reduced by half. It's no longer thin. It's nice and thick. There's a lovely consistency to it. So now I'm going to turn it off. I'll give you a quick stir through just so that you can see how much it's reduced. We're not going to put a lid on it. We're just going to let it continue going as it is. It's going to evaporate for the next half hour or so, and it'll just intensify and thicken. So we've turned it off. We're now going to add some Italian herb seasoning. Basically, if you don't have this, just get dried oregano, that'll be perfectly fine. And we're going to add quite a liberal amount of stuff. It looks like a crazy amount that we're adding. It's probably about a tablespoon and a bit. And then we're just going to stir that through. The sauce itself is still very, very warm. So it's just going to basically incorporate all the flavor of those dry herbs. It's going to rehydrate them. And we're just going to leave the lid off and let it continue steaming. And it's just going to keep thickening and intensifying in flavor. So it's nearly 6:30, which means that our dough has now been proving for nearly 9 hours. So I'm going to take it out now, and we're going to have a look inside and just see how much it's grown and developed as a dough. So I haven't touched this since you last saw it go into the oven. There it is there. You can see how much it's grown. You can see it's also a little bit wet, but that's a good thing because it's going to bake beautifully. So because it's a little bit wet, I take a little bit of flour and I sprinkle it across the top just so that it becomes a little bit easier to manage. And I'll now use my hand just to flatten it down, working my way around the bowl all the way until we develop a nice ball at the bottom of the bowl. Now I'm going to just put a little bit of flour on my board, take out the dough, which you can see is a little bit wet on the underside. Just a little bit of extra flour just to make it easier to manage. Roll it with your hands until you have what resembles like a ball folding underneath from the bottom so that you get a nice round ball of dough. I'm now going to take my knife and I'm going to cut it in half, just roughly, so we get two nice even balls. I'm going to roll one and put it back in there. I'm going to roll this one and I'm going to leave them on my board for about 10 or 15 minutes just to let the dough rest a little bit. At the same time, obviously the other ball that's been left in the bowl will also be resting. So we're going to start rolling our pizzas. I use our chopping board that we actually bought from IKEA. It was really cheap, it's really effective, and what's really nice about it is it hangs over the edge of your work surface, which makes it really easy to roll the pizza. Great, so we're going to start rolling the pizzas. You saw that the dough was quite wet, so the worst thing that you can do, just something that I did when I started making pizzas, is that I just kept putting more and more flour onto it to make it easier to work with. What that does is it dries the dough out and it doesn't make it as tasty. So I've gently floured the board, and now I'm going to start working it out into a disc shape with my fingers. A lot of people will say, pick it up, start tossing it in the air. Flour goes absolutely everywhere, it's really messy, and it's a real hassle. So I just leave it on the surface, I work it with my fingers, making it into a circle. Before I start rolling. It's getting a little bit wet, so again, just a touch of flour, not too much. Work it around, and we keep working it out. Now that I've got it to this shape and size, I'm going to start rolling it with my rolling pin. You move forwards and backwards initially, trying to maintain a circular type shape. I like to do a couple of rolls up and down, and then laterally. You'll see that as I'm rolling, the actual dough is shrinking. That's the gluten working, and that's what's going to give this dough that amazing elasticity. So you'll see as I roll, it stretches out to a good size, and then it starts to shrink. If you feel the dough starting to stick to the actual board itself, that's the wetness that we're talking about, and that's when you just apply a little bit more flour just to make sure that we're suppressing the wetness. Now you'll see that my dough is not a perfect circle, and that's not a big deal. All it needs to do is cover the circumference of my pizza dish, which I'm going to move over here. This dough is really, really robust, so you can pick it up and move it, and you just fold it over the edges. And then what I like to do is roll it into nice little circles, tubes, around the edge of the tray. What that does is it's going to allow the dough to puff up and make a really, really lovely bread-like crust, which is just delicious. That's one down. Now we're going to do the other one. Exactly the same way. We're just going to flour it gently and start working it into a disc with our fingers before we start rolling it. Right, now we're going to be doing Kirsten's pizza. She does hers a little bit differently. She likes a garlic and cheese crust. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the garlic oil that I've just made, so that's freshly crushed garlic with olive oil, and I'm just going to gradually work this around the inside of the dough. And I'm going to take a little bit of the cheese, which is sometimes a little bit more difficult to manage, and just put it in there. Don't worry about making it too neat, because we're just going to be rolling it over as I did with mine. So just a little bit of cheese and garlic. So now I'm going to roll the crust. What's important to note is that we're not striving for perfection with these pizzas. This is supposed to be relaxed, just a really nice casual meal that's really, really tasty, and that's highly customizable. So if somebody else wants something else in their crust, it's very easy to incorporate and really easy to do. We're not huge meat eaters, but Kirsten did once have a pizza that had Parma ham in the actual crust itself, which was absolutely delicious. This is probably the most important step of the entire pizza making process. You need to get your oven as hot as possible in order for the pizza to bake beautifully. We're very lucky, our oven gets very, very hot. So I'm going to turn our oven onto 220 degrees, and it is fan assisted, which means it's probably doing it at 240. I'm going to leave it on for about 6 or 7 minutes to make sure that that oven is absolutely roasting and baking inside and really, really hot. Toppings obviously are a preferential thing. Whatever you like to put on your pizza at this stage is entirely up to you. We go with a largely vegetarian type selection of items. Kirsten likes to add a little bit of prosciutto to hers, just at the end, with a bit of rocket to liven it up. I like to bake all of my ingredients. Sometimes if the supermarkets have got a good deal, I get avocados, which I put on at the end. So today we've got black olives, green olives, artichokes, the Parma ham, which we mentioned, the tomato base, which we'd made earlier, red onions, brown chestnut mushrooms, capsicums or yellow peppers, a selection of cheeses. I like the mozzarella. Kirsten likes to have cheddar because it's got a little bit more flavor to it, and the all-important garlic in oil. Right, so I'm going to start with Kirsten's pizza. So our pizzas are all done. We've got the prosciutto, the fresh garlic, and the rocket left that we're going to deal with once the pizzas are out of the oven. So the next step, we're going to put them in. Now, the all-important question is how long do the pizzas stay in there? So after a lot of trial and error, learning and knowing how to use our particular oven, the fail-safe time period for us is 11 minutes in the oven. Once it's finished, we turn the oven off, we open the door. That allows all the steam to escape and it gets a really nice solid base on the pizzas. Great, so that's been exactly 11 minutes. I'm now going to turn the oven off and I'm going to open the door. Our oven just expels a lot of heat, so I'm going to open it and move away. There we go. And that smells amazing. Now we're just going to leave them in there for 1 minute, as we said earlier, and just allow all that steam to come out, and that's just going to get a really nice base on our pizzas. Right, here we go. That's the last one. Send it onto the board. Amazing. Now we're going to do Kirsten's. We're going to finish hers. So she has Parma ham that we just put around the pizza, shredding it a little bit. And take some fresh rocket and we just liberally lay it on top of the pizza, which livens it up and just makes it look really, really nice. In the past, we used to use pizza cutters to cut our pizzas. I just found that when you were actually rolling it through, it was dragging a lot of the ingredients along and it just wasn't cutting it cleanly. So we've actually switched to just using a normal kitchen knife, which we just cut into the pizza like that, getting one cut through the middle, and then we just cut slices by just pressing down really firmly onto the dough, getting nice even slices of pizza. And there we have it, 2 delicious homemade pizzas for movie night.
Thanks for watching. You can also follow us on Instagram or check out our website at myhomefarm.co.uk. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button below And if you have any suggestions for any other videos you would like to see, please leave a comment. We hope to see you on our next video.